Nora watched her childhood friend Sarah go from nothing to rooftop dinners in Lagos. Designer bags, a glowing life, a caption that just said grateful. She was still in the village counting coins. So she opened the DMs and typed 7 words. "Sister, I need a change. Can I come?" Nora had always been the sharp one. Everyone in the village said so, and she had long stopped pretending it was not true. She was the girl who could read a room before she finished stepping into it, who talked her way around any corner, who made strangers feel like old friends within minutes and left every conversation feeling like she had won something. Her mother always said God gave her too much mouth and not enough patience, and Nora always laughed because she genuinely believed it was a compliment. But the village had slowly become a room with no door. She was 26 years old. She was waking up every morning to the same red dust, the same crawling heat, the same table outside her mother's compound where she sold provisions. Soap, seasoning, small sachets of things, and counted coins at the end of each day that never added up to what she needed. She was not lazy. She had never been lazy in her life. That was exactly the part that hollowed her out. She worked hard, showed up, pushed forward with everything she had. And nothing moved. The ground beneath her feet was completely still while the world, or at least Sarah's corner of it, kept advancing without her. She lay awake many nights asking God what the arrangement was supposed to be, turning the question over until sleep eventually took it from her. She never got a clear answer. What she got instead was another morning, another table, another day of watching the world stand still while she pushed against it with everything she had. Sarah's reply came the following morning before Nora had fully woken up. 3 words, no punctuation, no drama. "Come. I'll sort you." Nora read it 4 times to make sure she had not imagined it. Then she pressed the phone to her chest and screamed into her pillow so hard the neighbors could not hear it. Her mother appeared in the doorway almost immediately, wrapper half-tied, eyes already doing the calculation. Nora sat up and composed herself into something resembling calm. "I'm going to Lagos," she said. Her mother studied her from the doorway with a long, quiet look, the kind that mothers use when they already know the outcome but understand that saying so will change nothing. Then she said, "The city does not give, Nora. It trades. Make sure you know what you are bringing to the table before you sit down." Nora nodded with enormous patience. The nodding of someone who has already decided and is simply waiting for the objection to finish. She started packing before her mother left the room. She folded her best clothes carefully, with more attention than she had ever given them before, because they felt different now. Not just clothes but the opening costume of the person she was about to become. She packed her nicest shoes, her good earrings, her confidence pressed flat at the bottom of the bag like the firmest and most essential thing she owned. By Thursday she was on the bus, window seat, watching the village dissolve behind her in red dust and distance. She told herself she was not running away. She was running toward. There was a meaningful difference. Lagos would see her and understand immediately what it was working with. Sarah had gone first and simply warmed up the room. Nora was the main act, and the main act had finally stopped waiting in the wings. She fell asleep to that thought somewhere before the city swallowed the road whole. The Lagos Sarah lived in was not the Lagos Nora had been building in her head for 2 years. She had constructed the arrival in detail during all those late nights of scrolling. A sense of magnitude, some shift in the atmosphere, a feeling in the chest that would confirm she had reached the place she was made for. What she found instead was a 1-bedroom apartment on a quiet street with a ceiling fan that worked when it felt like it, a kitchen that smelled faintly of onions, and Sarah at the front door in a plain house dress with no makeup and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, looking the way people look when they have been working since 7 in the morning. "Welcome," Sarah said, hugged her properly, and went to put rice on the stove. Nora set her bag down and looked around. The apartment was decent, tidy, organized, a few good furniture pieces that showed someone with taste and limited budget had made thoughtful choices over time. But it was not the lifestyle. Not the rooftop and the candles and the smiling caption. It was a normal, functional flat where a woman came home after a long day, ate a quiet meal, and started the whole thing over again tomorrow. She filed this away and told herself the actual life was elsewhere. In the right rooms, the right events, the right circles that Sarah had access to but had not yet walked her into. She had not come all this way to sit in a one-bedroom apartment eating rice. She just needed those doors opened. Once the right people saw her clearly, the rest would arrange itself. She had always moved well in rooms. That part she did not doubt for a single second. The first opportunity came that weekend. Sarah's colleague James was hosting a small gathering. Drinks, easy conversation, maybe 15 people in a well-lit apartment in Lekki. Nora dressed like she was going somewhere significantly larger. She walked in expecting the room to pause. It did not pause. She found a group of men mid-discussion about something in the finance space and joined confidently, said something she meant to sound informed, and the error was clear in the half-second of silence that followed before the conversation moved around her like water around a stone. The man she had been speaking to smiled with perfect politeness and redirected the discussion without looking back at her. She laughed lightly, touched her glass, scanned the room like she had meant to move on anyway. She found a better conversation across the room with 2 women in events management and held her own comfortably, laughing at the right moments, asking the right questions, leaving them with her number. That felt better. She added them to the mental map she was building. Names, industries, who knew whom and how useful that might eventually become. She was methodical. She had always been methodical. The first stumble was nothing. Every room had a learning curve. But later that night, washing her face in Sarah's bathroom mirror, she felt it, a small and unwelcome crack running through the glass of her certainty. She pressed her palms flat on the sink and stared at herself until it passed. The city just had not seen her properly yet. One awkward moment followed by a recovered evening meant nothing at all. She was still in the introduction phase. Every story had one. She had read enough of them to know that the introduction was never where the interesting part happened. She walked back out smiling, sat on the couch, and began quietly mapping her next move. The warnings did not arrive with horns or visible urgency. They came softly, wrapped in ordinary conversation, and Nora walked past every single one of them without breaking stride. Sarah's colleague Grace found her at a work event Sarah had brought her along to. A product launch in a bright room full of people networking with visible effort. Grace was warm-faced and steady, mid-30s, the kind of woman who had clearly been through enough to stop performing relaxation and simply have it. She looked at Nora with something like recognition and said, "Lagos will test everything you think you are. The ones who last are not the ones who arrived with the most fire. They are the ones willing to be nobody for a little while, to learn the city before they try to own it." She said it without drama, the way someone states a fact about traffic or the weather. Nora smiled warmly, thanked her, and privately filed Grace under women who dress fear up as wisdom because it makes a small life feel like a deliberate choice rather than an outcome they settled for. Then there was the older woman at a gathering in Ikoyi the following week. Well-dressed, unhurried, standing at the edge of the room with a glass she barely touched and the complete composure of someone who had watched this particular party play out many times before. She observed Nora work the room for a while, not unkindly, just watching, the way someone watches a film they have already seen. Then, when Nora passed close enough, she said without introduction, "You move like someone who is owed something. This city will correct that." She looked away before Nora could answer, as if the observation required nothing further from either of them. Nora carried the irritation home and set it down only after she had rewritten the encounter several times in her head, until the woman became jealous and irrelevant rather than uncomfortably accurate. The invitations kept coming. She said yes to everything. She was running low on money and high on momentum, which she told herself was the correct ratio for this stage of the journey. Every connection made was one closer to the door she was looking for. She kept her eyes open and her smile ready and her real thoughts entirely to herself. And then there was Sarah herself. A Wednesday night with the power out across the street, 2 candles on the coffee table between them, the city reduced to distant noise. Sarah looked tired that night in a way that went deeper than the workday, the tired of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and had briefly considered putting it down. She set her cup on the table and shifted to face Nora more fully, the way someone does when they are about to say something they have been holding for a while. She began to speak. Something about the first year. About how many times she had almost left. About a specific night in year 1 when. "Do you want to watch something on my data?" Nora said, already reaching for her phone. Sarah stopped mid-sentence. She looked at Nora with an expression that lasted only a moment before she smiled and said, "Sure." Nora did not register the door that had just, without drama, closed behind her. She fell asleep that night running through her plan involving Daniel. Timing, positioning, every variable accounted for. She was 3 moves in and ahead of schedule. She was certain of it. It collapsed on a Saturday evening in front of 12 people, and nobody in the room raised their voice. Daniel was 34, ran his own logistics company, drove a clean black SUV, and had been attentive in precisely the way that confirmed Nora's read on the situation. She had spent 3 weeks inside the strategy, studying his patterns, placing herself at every gathering he attended, calibrating her presence to what she had determined he responded to. She had been patient, careful, and, she believed, extraordinarily precise. She had not accounted for the fact that he had seen the whole thing from the beginning. It happened mid-conversation in the wide living room of a mutual friend, the atmosphere shifting without obvious cause. Daniel looked at her with the calm of someone who has rehearsed nothing because they need nothing prepared, and said, "I know what you've been doing, Nora. I picked it up the second time I saw you. You're not interested in me. You're interested in what you think being connected to me unlocks for you. And I'm not saying that with any judgment. Lagos makes people strategic. But I'm not a door, and I'm not a step." A small pause. "I hope you find what you're genuinely looking for." Then he turned and started a different conversation with someone else. Nora stood in place for 3 full seconds. Then she walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and stood at the sink without drinking it. She could hear the room behind her continue. Laughter, someone's music preference being debated, the world reorganizing immediately around the absence of her plan, as if it had never been load-bearing at all. She stayed in the kitchen for longer than made sense. A woman she did not know came in to refill her drink, and they exchanged a smile, and the woman left and Nora was alone again at the sink. She put the water down, picked up her bag, said quiet goodbyes to 2 people she barely knew and slipped out before anyone could ask her if she was all right. She took the bus home because she could not justify a cab. She checked her account balance somewhere on the bridge because the tightness in her chest needed something specific to hold. The number on the screen made her throat close. She had been spending with the certainty of a woman whose plan was actively working. Clothes for the right impressions, transport to the right places, the small and constant costs of performing access she did not yet have. The plan was not working. The plan had not been working for longer than she had been willing to admit. The plan was finished. She let herself into the apartment and sat on the couch without turning on a single light. She sat there for a long time. She thought about calling her mother and could not find one sentence that would not expose everything. She tried to locate the next move, the angle, the reframe, the way a setback becomes a setup, and found nothing. No calculation, no repositioning, no version of the story she could tell herself that made the situation workable. The voice in her head that had never once gone quiet since she stepped onto that bus, the one with the plan, the one with the answer, the one that had kept her moving with absolute confidence from the moment she arrived, was completely silent. She sat in Sarah's dark living room and listened to it say nothing at all. Sarah found her just after midnight. She came and sat at the other end of the couch without turning on the light or asking any questions. They sat together with the city outside, a distant horn, a generator somewhere below, the low and indifferent hum of Lagos continuing without either of them in mind. After a while, Sarah said, "Can I tell you something I have never posted about?" She talked for a long time. The real first year, the year that did not make it to the grid. Sleeping on a colleague's floor for 4 months because she could not cover rent and was too proud to say it to anyone back home. The job that nearly let her go in year 2 over a mistake she could not fully defend, and then came close to ending again 6 months after that. The relationship that looked, from a distance, like exactly what a good life was supposed to look like, and that cost her things on the inside she was still, quietly, working through. The nights in this apartment, this same couch, when she sat with the phone face down because she could not maintain the performance any longer, eating bread for dinner and telling herself tomorrow would be different. "Everything you saw on my page," Sarah said. "I earned it in ways I was too ashamed to post. There were nights in this city when I had nothing and I was completely alone in it. I was crying in a bathroom stall at a job I was terrified of losing and posting pictures from the same week that made it look like I was thriving." She was quiet for a moment. "You were envying a performance, Nora. The actual story was never on the grid." Nora sat with that in the dark. She thought about her mother in the doorway on packing morning, saying the city does not give, it trades. She thought about Grace and the water she had been offered and set aside. She thought about the woman in Ikoyi who said she moved like someone owed something. She thought about the Wednesday night and the door she had closed by reaching for her phone. Every warning had been real. She had reclassified every one of them into something she could dismiss. "Why did you let me come?" she said at last. "If you already knew how it would go?" Sarah looked at her steadily. "Because you wouldn't have believed me any other way. You had to feel it yourself." Nora did not go back to the village. But something in her went still that night. The running part, the calculating part, the part that had been chasing a version of someone else's life since before she even boarded the bus. She stayed. She began again, quietly, without a plan mapped out or a caption ready. She found one small, unglamorous thing she could actually do and she started doing it. Most days it felt like not enough. Some days it felt like nothing at all. But it was hers. Not a copy. Not a performance built for an audience watching from a distance. 3 months later she was at a small desk in Sarah's spare room, working before the city woke up, building something she could not yet name. She had stopped checking Sarah's page. She had started filling her own. She put her phone face down on the desk. She kept going. If this story found you tonight, if you have ever lain awake watching someone else's highlight reel and wondering why your own life has not caught up yet, you are not alone, and this is not the end of your story. More of these on Folktales by Inaya. Subscribe and stay. The next one was made for you.